everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mike's, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day, and our co-sponsor CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory, prices, and delivery of cards for Magic Online. I am Evan Irwin, and we get started each Top 10 by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
Am I centered? How do I look? We have the new formats.
Right. This is using a brand new program that I had to go pay for because Skype was stupid. And they stopped Skyping the right way. So Zoom.us, please don't update your stuff and break this because that would suck. Also, Ruben Bressler.
Yeah, shout out to Zoom.us. This app looks like it was made out of duct tape and Tinker Toys, but it's functional as opposed to Skype, which looks pretty and doesn't work.
It doesn't work at all.
There's a life lesson in there for you people.
Well, I'm happy it works. We're up and running. I was very concerned, but we're good to go. And
it's my birthday.
And it is totally your birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you guys for giving me the lovely shout outs on Twitter. You made my notifications trash, but in the best way.
Well, it's better than how your notifications normally become trash, which is your
real
garbage opinions and reg unbans.
That's true.
All right. Well, we also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most luxuriant and letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 zombies. Ruben?
Well, this week's winner is username Insignacious, who had to compete with 2 weeks worth of commentary this time around.
It's true.
Because we had a little bit of a delay. But I really like this comment. When you mention the words zombie and Magic the Gathering in the same sentence, my mind immediately jumps to what I believe is the most iconic zombie in the entire game. This card not only embodies the flavor of the tribe, it also represents an important milestone in Magic's design philosophy, being the first vanilla bear for the beloved color of death and necromancy. Don't laugh. The card I really wanted to see on someone's list is Walking Corpse. Yes, I know a 2/2 for 2 with no abilities isn't going to see competitive play anytime soon, but this was the first time Wizards ever gave a black creature like that. And this card just oozes that refreshing zombie flavor. As Jadar, the as of yet unprinted ghoul caller, so aptly stated, feeding is why they, the zombies, fight. Feeding is why they are feared. And that's why, for the past hour and 20 minutes, I've been quietly chanting, Walking Corpse, Walking Corpse, as you three run down your top 10 zombies. And I'm sad to say that my Grizzly Ghoul didn't make the cut. Yes, Ruben's laugh lines and nose look like Nicol Bolas's horns and gem. This is not a joke. I just noticed it. It's making me crave some Grixis Control. Have a wonderful day. Well, other than me looking like the greatest villain in the multiverse because of my laugh lines, I just love that comment about Walking Corpse and think it's a great entry.
Wow, Ruben Bolasler.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, Walking Corpse came out in Innistrad, and it was a big deal because seriously, you cannot, previous to Walking Corpse, find a 2-mana 2/2 in black that didn't have some stupid drawback, like when it dies, everyone, like you discard a card or whatever. Like, there's some horrible examples out there. This one's good old fashioned.
They reprinted Spineless Thug, which was a 2/2 for 2 zombie that couldn't block. Like 5 times probably. I mean, it came out in like Nemesis, and then it was in a bunch of core sets, I think. I had one in a Chaos draft recently, is why I know that. But then when they finally printed actual Grizzly Bear in black, it was a big deal. It was so big a deal, I think Mark Rosewater wrote part of an article about how they were shifting the design philosophy a little bit on it.
Wow.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a big deal to have a bear in your colors. Like, maybe for blue, because blue often they only get those at uncommon and higher. But
Coral Merfolk and Goblin Piker in red.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a 2/1, but
that one's a 2/1 now. I mean, that's what I'm saying. And so is Coral Merfolk. Those two colors. I don't know if they have a 2/2 for 2.
Yeah.
Does red?
Maybe. I'm sure that does now that I'm thinking of it. But regardless, the point is Walking Corpse is sweet and was a great choice.
Yeah.
Is definitely a milestone of a card in terms of zombies and how they went from there. But so that said, Insignacious.
Insignacious.
Hey, man. hey, y'all.
Inside.
Y'all just... You just holler at us and we'll just get you, we'll get you $50 and stuff.
Y'all
we'll get
call
you.
black now, you hear?
Now, It is time for the top 10 discard spells. Now, this got a little weird. I don't think we talked about it too much. I actually stuck 2 spells, like Sorcery Instance and so on.
Oh, heavens. I went way off the reservation.
And that's totally fine. I'm just letting you know sort of what frame of mind I was in. I was like, well, it's like a creature.
Kevin is going to be so mad at me for my list. Y'all have no clue.
Oh, God. Here we go. Well, Ruben, why don't you kick it off here with number 10?
I started out with my traditional way of starting out top 10 lists, which is it's higher on someone else's list.
Nice.
Jeez.
Nice. Well, Aaron, what is your number 10?
My number 10 is an apology because we have not been very nice on this show. We have not always been very nice on this show, in particular when it comes to one young lady named Rebecca Gay. Hashtag gay pride is real. YouTube comments love to remind us of how we don't nominate Rebecca Gay for either her artwork or for her cards. And I see you. I see the YouTube comments, and this is my olive branch to you all. My number 10 is Persecute Artist. So Persecute Artist is 1 and 2 black. It is from Unhinged. It's a sorcery. It says, choose an artist other than Rebecca Gay. Target player reveals his or her hand and discards all non-land cards by the chosen artist. And the flavor text says, the torches and pitchforks were no match for Rebecca's fans. And artist is Rebecca, don't mess with me, Gay, literally on the card. And yeah, you guys love you some Rebecca Gay. You guys love the basic lands, hashtag gay pride, hashtag gay rights, hashtag gay agenda, all of that. I'm completely on board with that. And I see you. And what better way to say I see you? And we're sorry, don't hurt us, than to have my number 10 be this card.
We screwed it up. We're sorry for real.
Oh my God, they came for us. People who never comment were like, listen, I made a YouTube comment for this reason. Like, you guys love you some Gay.
That's a spectacularly good choice. For those of you who are unaware as to why this is a card in the first place, this was a play on a rumor at one point, I think, where Rebecca suggested that Wizards discontinued her artwork because it didn't fit in art-wise. And then their phone lines and their emails just got filled up by various fans, as our YouTube comments and our Reddit comments certainly did as well. Mm-hmm. In that case, I think it was just a rumor. I don't think it was real.
Right.
But that's why the card happened, as a sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge to talk about it. But yeah, certainly fitting for our top 10 list as well.
So for my number 10, it takes a lot to be featured in one of the worst sets of all time. Like one of the examples of man, don't be like that set. That set screwed it up. But it also included one of the most interesting discard spells ever. It saw play. I know it saw play at the Pro Tour. I believe it saw play in Standard at the time as well. Very, very powerful. But it's also terrible in many ways in that you have to give in. You have to go all the way. Because when you're from Saviors of Kamigawa, that bar is low. That bar real low. So when one of the best cards in the set is a common and it's Sink into Takanuma, that's a card. That's a sweet card. It's a black and 3 generic mana for a common sorcery arcane. Thank you very much. And it has Sweep, that awesome mechanic that we never saw ever again.
The mechanic that I called the worst mechanic in the history of Magic the Gathering in an episode of these here top 10s.
It's pretty bad. And it has Sweep, return any number of swamps you control to their owner's hand. Target player discards a card for each swamp returned this way. So if you are running mono black and they do have the shields down, this is still terrible, but it is a way to just yank a bunch of cards at once, all sort of out of nowhere, and it was a legitimate bright spot in what was otherwise a really bad set.
Boy, is that card just not great still.
The card's fine.
So bad. Oh
what
my
even
God.
is a Takanuma? Like, was that a place?
Takanuma is a place.
It was a place.
Takanuma
okay.
is a swamp in Kamigawa where something specific happened that I'm forgetting, but it is a lore relevant place.
That's like the other day, I had the misfortune of getting paired up against Caleb Durward in a Legacy stream when he was running Pox, and there was this Kamigawa land of sacrifice all your lands and get a demon. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what is this? I just had no idea.
Tomb of, can't remember it. Immemori or something? I don't know.
I just had to read the card. I was like, I'd never seen this before.
Okay. All right, moving on here to number 9. Ruben, do you have one?
I do. My number 9 is it's a spell, but it's a permanent. So, don't at me. But it's one of the most iconic and powerful planeswalkers that has ever been printed, and primarily is used for her ability to make people discard cards. And that card is Liliana of the Veil. Liliana of the Veil is a colorless black for a legendary planeswalker, errata, with a loyalty 3. +1, each player discards a card. There you go. -2, target player sacks a creature. -6, separate all permanents target player controls into 2 piles. That player sacrifices all permanents in the pile of their choice. Honestly, you don't really need those last 2 abilities because this card is just bananas. I mean, I think that there's no arguing that this card is amazing. We can have the talk of whether this is a discard spell or not, but it was also a promo that you got at the Pro Tour. It was also reprinted in Masters 2017. It still commands a powerful price tag and features one of the most iconic arts for one of the most iconic characters in the game. Never ended up winning a Pro Tour, but got 2nd place at 2 different Pro Tours. One time in the hands of Jerry Thompson when his Mardu Pyromancer fell in the finals up against Lantern Control and Luis Salvato. And the other time when Yuya Watanabe fell in the finals against Stanislav Sivka's Eggs. So, not exactly matchups where Liliana is going to shine, but certainly a very powerful card.
Yeah, I mean, she's versatile in the fact that she's good against control decks. She's good against aggro decks. Jun doesn't leave home without at least 3 or 4 copies of her. She's the standard by which every other Liliana is judged. Anytime a Liliana comes out, is it Liliana of the Veil? Nope, can't have it. It isn't good enough. And I seem to remember even conversations with, even going back to Shadows over Innistrad, I think they had wanted to see about bringing her back, and they were like, nope, too good for standard. We can't do it. And so, Liliana, the Last Hope, I think is close, and certainly the new Liliana, I think, is good in her own way. But yeah, just really big shoes to fill and has shown the test of time.
Wow. I mean, aside from the possible definition of what a discard spell happens to be, despite the fact that the thing that disqualified her for me was that most of her usage was sacrificing the creature and making them sacrifice the creature, and the +1 was sort of like, it's like there.
It can be argued.
I would say the +1 is more relevant than the -2, but having both certainly.
Let us know in the comments.
Obviously having both makes her Liliana of the Veil, but that utility of having that planeswalker. But
sure,
if you were a control deck and your opponent played Liliana on 3 on the play and ticked her up to 4, that game was almost just over at that point.
Yeah, she's quite powerful, and that was a RPTQ promo.
Okay.
For those who got to play in one of those, they handed you a $200 bill, basically. Congratulations.
That's the least they could do, considering how the RPTQs go.
Considering how much you have to climb and scratch to get anywhere. Aaron, what's your number 9?
So I have a couple modal spells on this list because, discard cards are good until they're not good. If you draw a discard spell in the late game, it's probably not very good. Your opponent has probably done everything they want to do. It just doesn't mean as much. And so you want to have a card that has some options to it. And my number 9 is probably the first discard spell that I can think of that really had some other modes to it that made it useful in other situations, specifically in mono black, specifically in 8-rack in Modern. This is a card that sometimes sees play. Mono black, in fact, really likes this card because they pair it with cards like Urborg and Runechanter's Pike, and you can have a really, really good time. And in some cases, it even doubles as a removal spell. My number 9 is Funeral Charm. So Funeral Charm costs 1 black. It was originally printed in Visions, which is one of my favorite sets. It's an instant. You can choose one. Target player either chooses and discards a card, or target creature gets +2/-1 until end of turn, or target creature gains Swamp Walk until end of turn. So one of the nice things is if you're playing Urborg, you have a Phyrexian Vat Mother, and you're like, woo, Swamp Walk. And so if the discard spell isn't useful and the +2/-1 isn't useful, you have this neat little land walk ability, or you have a removal spell if you need to. And so it's just a very versatile card. The Charm set is a very iconic series of cards from Magic the Gathering, and it's just nice to have something else to do when you don't need to discard a card.
Yeah, it's one of the few instant speed discard spells, which is very good. And the Piracy Charm, is that right? The one
Piracy Charm is the one from Planar Chaos. It's the color shifted version. So if you needed any more proof that this is an iconic discard spell, they put a discard spell at instant speed in blue. And
it got weird.
Inspired by Funeral Charm.
Things got a little weird back in Planar Chaos.
Things got a little weird. Piracy Charm saw play in Legacy Merfolk for about half a minute.
Oh yeah.
That was a hell of a time.
That was a weird time. And Funeral Charm, I mean, it's so funny to me now. We're starting to really get close to this old man magic thing where I'm just like, I remember when they had creatures with abilities on them, and like Visions was like the set that had come into play abilities, and that was where they kind of broke all that ground. And so this brings back all sorts of memories of playing Magic way back in the day when I first learned, and this card was also sweet. So. I have one. I'm a little surprised it's not here on anybody else's list. I was kind of expecting, there's sometimes when you choose one, I'm like, this is going to be higher on somebody else's list. Like, I don't know where they put it. Maybe we'll be the same, but I'm sure you guys got it on here. You don't got it on here. Considering, I'm pretty sure this thing is won Pro Tours. And this certainly was an absolute format staple. This card came out, and if it didn't really sort of wow people at first, like, sort of first glance. It's just an uncommon, but it was from a new set, and it was like, well, it's just kind of mind rot, and then it's just kind of lava spike. But if you put the two together, and you get Blightning.
Yeah.
Blightning is amazing. Blightning is a black, a red, and a generic mana for an uncommon sorcery originally from Shards of Alara. I'm sorry, it was a common sorcery back then.
Yeah, it was a common.
Blightning deals 3 damage to target player. That player discards 2 cards. So Bloodbraid Elf into Blightning was often a thing that happened, and it was often devastating. So not only are you taking 3 in haste, you're taking 3 from Blightning, and you're losing 2 cards. That was a play pattern that happened for about a year and a half.
Yep.
And it was annoning.
Yep, Bituminous Blast into Bloodbraid Elf into Blightning for all those guy bees, for the fat guy bees.
Bituminous Blast?
Bituminous Blast into Bloodbraid Elf into Blightning. Followed up with a Broodmate Dragon the next turn. And yeah, that was the deck, man. That was Simon Gertzen, of course, won the Jund Pro Tour in Standard in San Diego in 2010. And Blightning was a major piece of that. That was back when Jund was a much more aggressive strategy. With your haste creatures and your burn spells to the face.
Right.
Lightning a little bit worse now, obviously, as not only has Jund sort of shifted into a more mid-range, almost control type shell, but also it cannot kill planeswalkers anymore, which is a problem. But Lightning certainly had its day in the sun, and yeah, the mind rot plus lava spike your face. Certainly a very good entry on the list.
Well, based on the Scryfall entry, and I'd probably double check this, but the Scryfall entry actually has it saying target player or planeswalker.
Oh, really?
And that's really interesting. They errated it because when they did the any target errata thing.
Planeswalker. Wow.
That's
I thought that was errated differently.
So Kolagon's Command has largely replaced this card, I think, in Modern in terms of like what it's doing in the deck or whatever, and to make it more toolboxy and have more options and whatever than just straightforward like again mind rot / lava spike. But Blightning was a hell of a card.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's move on here to number 8. Aaron, what's number 8?
My number 8 is a card that has become a verb. We like to talk about cards and how it reaches a point in the zeitgeist where it becomes so iconic that you become a verb. You're bolting something, you're pathing something. That's a really big compliment for a card to get. And this card has definitely become the name it's the name of an archetype, which I've actually mentioned earlier in the show. There have been offshoots of this card that we've seen. Reed Duke has been known to sleeve up this deck in Legacy a time or two. I've caught him playing this deck before. And it's a card that has fractions on it. This is a time where we had fractions on cards. I mean, you can't really say that anymore. My number 8 is Pox. So Pox is from Ice Age. It's a sorcery. It costs 3 solid black mana. Each player loses 1/3 of his or her life. Third, then chooses and discards 1/3 of the cards in his or her hand, then sacrifices 1/3 of the creatures he or she controls, and finally sacrifices 1/3 of the lands he or she controls. Get out your calculators, kids. Round each loss up. Effects that prevent or redirect damage cannot be used to counter this loss of life. That's also a line of text you don't really see anymore. But the Pox deck, this is a thing in Legacy. There's a deck that sort of just runs a bunch of black spells, and you run maybe like another spirit, or you run an ensnaring bridge, and you just find obnoxious ways to kill your opponent. Maybe with some factories, a little 2/2s that you can do. That's a thing. This is the in Modern you have the 8 rack, which uses smallpox. Which is sort of the offshoot of this, but this is definitely a thing. This launched so many derivatives of this card. It launched an archetype, and it's just a Pox effect that you think about, and just very old school and very iconic to me.
Absolutely. Inspired Death Cloud as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. which I love Death Cloud. Death Cloud's amazing. And Smallpox just took one thing. It took one life. It took a card and a creature and a land. And that's super adorable. And it is great that sort of like, oh, it's a Pox effect. You're like, oh, okay. You're like, whatever.
Yeah.
And Pox, it's weird. Like back in the day, man, back when Ice Age, there got to a point where it's like when the font is so small and the lines just keep going, you're just like, whatever, man. I don't even care. Let's just go play something that I can read and understand. Like, ooh, Urnham Gen, Like, no. Pox was...
The old school Pox decks used to run Funeral Charm alongside all of that other garbage with Mishra's Factory. I think they ran like... Wow. I think the creature of choice back then was Steel Golem. But obviously, the legacy decks are running Nether Spirits alongside their stuff. The highest, it appears as if the highest finish ever in a big event, Star City Games Invitational Top 8, 3rd/4th place, Reed Duke with Pox in 2011.
Nice.
I see you, baby.
Fantastic. Ruben, what's your number 8?
My number 8 is the only creature on my list. And when you think discard, and again, this is another one that it's like, you say what a thing is, and you're like, okay, I know what that creature does, right? Or you say Pox, it's a Pox effect. You say Millstone, it's a Mill effect. If I call something a Specter, you know that this creature probably has flying and does something when it hits your opponent, right? We got Blizzard Specter, we got Blazing Specter. Well, that all started with Hypnotic Specter. Hypnotic Specter, let me count how many times it's been printed here.
Jeez.
17 times.
And the kids still don't respect it.
So here's the alpha text for Hypnotic Specter. Colorless black, 2/2. Flying. An opponent damaged by Specter must discard a card at random from his or her hand. Ignore this effect if opponent has no cards left in hand, which happens a lot with Hypnotic Specter. A common play line with Hypnotic Specter, of course, would be, turn 1, Dark Ritual, Get Out Hippie, as it is obviously nicknamed many, many times. This was a key piece in the Rack Control deck at the second, I believe, Worlds in Seattle in 2005, in which Alexander Blumke won that tournament. It's also won in the Paul McCabe at Pro Tour Dallas in 1996. And was a one-of in the Doran Rock deck that Uri Peleg used to beat Patrick Chapin in the finals of Worlds in 2007.
Wow.
That Evan and I were both there for. And if you recall, Game 5 came down to Uri playing it as a chump blocker to stand in front of a Bogart and Hellkite. And I believe Patrick Chapin had sideboarded out all of his shocks and didn't expect Hypnotic Specter to remain in the deck after sideboard, and it made a cameo appearance as a chump blocker to win Israel its first world championship.
Wow. I mean, Hypnotic Specter has such an incredible history. Like, when I first learned Magic, like, this was the thing. What you did in black was you played Swamp Dark Ritual Hippie. What you did in green was you played Forest Birds of Paradise. What you did in red is you played Mountain, and you bolt either of those things. Or if you're in white, you play Swords to Plowshares on either of those things, and that's what you do. This is Magic. That's how it works. And like, you bolt the bird, you bolt the hippie. You swords the bird, you swords the hippie, and that was just how Magic worked. There was so long a time period, like for years and years and years and years, was just like, this is how Magic is, and you're just going to get the Dark Ritual something, and whatever they put at 3 mana for black is just probably going to be ridiculous if you get it on turn 1. And
how did Blue deal with it?
Blue sucked.
They didn't. They unsummoned it.
They didn't do much. They didn't,
Stasis. Stasis is what they did to it.
It took a minute for Blue to kind of catch up, to be honest. Like, they had
where
to.
We are.
Yeah.
I mean, it's bad, but it's fine because you had your removal spell sort of in the removal colors, and Blue was just like, I guess I'll draw some more cards or something.
Right.
But yeah, Hypnotic Specter itself is an amazing card, and this was the one. Like, if I was going to choose a creature, this was the creature. Like, it's too iconic. Okay, so this next one is awesome. I guess I have a tendency to enjoy discard spells that can take your whole hand, because
bigger go home. Yeah,
they had This was a card that I played against at regionals, and I've told this story before, where I was playing mono white, like Mesa Pegasus, whatever. What's it called again? The one that makes the Pegasus.
Sacred Mesa.
Sacred Mesa. Thank you very much. And Gauntlet of Power or whatever, So all my lands were making double mana and stuff, and like it was amazing. And I was playing against a Corlash deck, and Corlash cannot beat that deck, even if it takes all 7 cards out of your hand, which is exactly what Persecute did when he named white. And I still won that game. I just destroyed him. It wasn't even close. It was amazing. I got to play Martyrs and all this other stuff. Proclamation of Rebirth. Persecute is a 2 black spell. It's a rare sorcery originally from Urza's Saga. And it says, choose a color. Target player reveals their hand and discards all cards of that color. Because... get you. And there was another tournament, another regionals, in fact, where, fun quick story, we had a tire blowout, and then we all kind of decided that we were going to lie and say that we were late to a wedding, so they would put our tire in front of the other people's tires. Look, I'm just being clean, all right? It was not something I'm proud of. But they put us at the front of the line, they fixed our tire, and by God, we made it. We made it to the fact that we're late, and so we all had to play each other because we were the ones that had to play in round 2, so we already started with a loss. So I was playing mono black control, and they were playing tooth and nail, and they toothed before I could persecute green, and that was the end of that story. So Persecute is an amazing spell, and it can take every card in your hand if you name the right color.
Yeah, it would have been awkward to have Persecute Artist on this list and not have actual Persecute, which is also one of it's a card that is featured in one of the most iconic moments in early Magic history, when John Finkel and Chris Benefell were playing the United States Finals match in 2002, maybe 2001, 2, somewhere around there, and Finkel obviously goes Swamp, Dark Ritual, Dark Ritual, Dark Ritual. Persecute your hand, Skittering Horror.
Jesus.
So Chris Benefeld didn't have got Mind Twisted turn 1 and was facing down a 4/3 before he made a play. He played a land for his turn, and on the second turn, John Finkel played a Rishadan Fort.
Wow.
So that's how that Nationals ended.
Wow.
Yeah, I think there's video of that one, and you can go back and look at that, but that was part of the early legend of John Finkel.
All right, so we're going to move on here to number 7. It's going to be a minute because I don't have a number 7. Ruben, do you?
I don't. Mine is higher on someone else's list. I only have a total of 3 hires. They're nicely spread out throughout my list.
It's true. Aaron, what's your number 7?
So one of the nice things about landfall is that even if you have extra lands or you get flooded, your lands still technically do things where you could be, boosting a step links, or you could be bringing back a blood gas or something like that. And so you kind of get rewarded for just playing Magic, just doing what you would normally be doing anyways, just kind of making your land drops. Another ability that kind of rewards you for doing that is Retrace, where if you happen to get flooded or it happens to be late in the game, you don't necessarily need that land. You can pitch your land to Retrace and cast a spell in your graveyard by pitching that land and paying the mana cost. And so you have cards like Worm's Harvest, and Flame Jab and things of that nature. And if, God forbid, you have Life from the Loam, where you're just always able to have land in your hand, you can have a really, really good time, such as the good times I've had casting my number 7, which is Raven's Crime. Yeah. So Raven's Crime is from Eventide. It costs 1 black. It's a sorcery. It just says target player discards a card. But it has Retrace. You may play this card from your graveyard by discarding a land card in addition to paying its other costs. So when Zombie Loam first came around, which was really one of the earliest incarnations of Modern Dredge, you were running this in Life from the Loam. And so against a control deck, you would just loop it. Be like, Life from the Loam, here's a land, Raven's Crime. Here's a land, Raven's Crime. You got a hand? Okay, cool. Land, Raven's Crime. And you would just rip their hand apart. And then once they had a low enough hand, you would just do what you came to do. And so I can't tell you how many hands I just destroyed with this card. And opponents just watching their face go, yeah, I get it, Raven's Crime. Are you done? And I'm like, they see a card, Raven's Crime. Like and just watching their morale kind of drop just feels amazing. And so, and the art is just really, really creepy and really embodies kind of the spirit of Raven's Crime, of literally the Raven running away with someone's thoughts and their face kind of being pulled back in that fashion. And so the art is great, the effect is great, and I've had a lot of really, really good times with this card.
Yeah, Raven's Crime is just like, for me, it's the perfect Retrace card. Like if there wasn't like Retrace the mechanic and it just said, discard a card, you may play this card from your graveyard to blah, 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 I think it would still be absolutely terrific and absolutely play. It doesn't need to be part of a larger whole of a mechanic, I think. But regardless, like this was a very tournament viable card. This was very close to my top 10 list, and I'm glad you got it.
Absolutely. And combos super well with Life from the Loam and Dakmore Salvage, both. So it's a perfect entry for Aaron Campbell's.
Very nice.
And hey, you get Ravens Crimed on turn 1, and you're like, this is going to be an adventure.
But because it's a choose thing, I think a lot of opponents underestimate it. They're like, well, okay, her next discard spell. But when you back turn,
but it plays out a lot like the Pox games.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gets pretty brutal really quickly.
Yeah.
And personally, I'm just like, I see Ravens Crown, and I'm like, oh God. Oh God. I don't want to be in this game. This is going to hurt. I got to give away everything.
As soon as Ravens Crime, they go basic Swamp Ravens Crime, and you're like, all right. Do I just concede now and save half an hour, or do I try to win my 15% of the time?
Gross. All right, we move here to number 6. Again, I don't have one. It's higher on someone else's list, and for what it's worth, I'm glad it's higher on someone else's list. Ruben, what's your number 6?
All right. Now hear me out.
Oh, God.
This card is a sorcery that has the word discard on it.
I'm listening.
Here we go.
It's highly played in many, many, many decks.
Mm-hmm.
It has a Pro Tour win. It has been on the banned and restricted list. It's in the actually every card on my list is in the Pro Tour cube. It's in the Magic Online cube, but it's in the Magic Online cube, and it's in the top 128 all-time Magic cards according to the Magic bracket.
Don't say Time Twister.
No. Time Twister doesn't make you discard cards. Wheel of Fortune does.
Yes!
Oh, my God. All right, it's fine.
If you've ever played a control deck and got wheeled, boy, let me tell you, that don't feel great. So Wheel of Fortune costs 2 colorless and a red, and it's a sorcery. Each player discards his or her hand, then draws 7 cards.
I love it. I love people who play this in Vintage because I actually did this the other day during our Patreon stream. I was playing DPS, which is Dark Petition Storm, and so getting a turn 1 wheel is hilarious. Especially if your opponent is playing Dredge and you don't know it. I can't tell you how many people have blind done that to me, and I'm like, thanks! And I just do it, dredge my brains out, and have a really good time. The card is so great, and I just can't help but hear the voice of like the Wheel of Fortune. I love it.
It's terrific.
Pat Sajak would be very interested in this. In addition to if you can go land Mox Wheel, like you've drawn 3 cards on your opponent. Essentially, it's
Well, at this point, the revised edition is over $100.
Yeah,
they are expensive.
It is.
I have a Locust God EDH, and thank God for Magus of the Wheel and Magus of the Wheel, because I would never be able to afford it otherwise.
Yeah, this was one of the reserve list cards that was actually reprinted as a Judge foil, which is over $330 right now. So, congrats to those who still have that thing, because it's never going to be reprinted again. And in fact, it shouldn't have been reprinted, quote unquote, at all if you go by the letter of the law. Yada yada yada.
Right.
So, so that's a very small club. Like Phyrexian Negator's also in that club, and Karn and so on and so forth. But Wheel of Fortune itself as a card, like looking back now, again, this is through the prism of history. Like the revised version is like $100. Are you kidding me? This card
Magic Online, it's like $3.
I was shocked at how expensive they were.
Yeah, this was just not a very awesome card back in the day. It was good, but you can only play it in what was vintage, and no one could afford that. So here we are at $100 card. My God. Okay, Aaron, what's your number 6?
My number 6 was very much a dog whistle for the right people. This was a card that came out recently, and a lot of people didn't get it. They were like, I have to discard cards. They were like, why would I want to do that? This card is trash. But if you're like me, you don't mind discarding cards. This card was a godsend. This card had an immediate impact in Modern, in Legacy. I think it saw play in Standard. I don't think I was playing Standard at the time, but I think it saw play. It did see play because I was playing Black-Green Delirium at the time. So yes, this card did see play. The card is now $22 from Eldritch Moon. Who would have thought? My number 6 is Collective Brutality.
Yeah.
So Collective Brutality is 1 in a black. It's a sorcery with Escalade. So you can discard a card and you can pay this cost for each mode chosen beyond the first. So it says choose 1 or more. You can target an opponent, reveals his or her hand. You choose an instant or sorcery from it, and they discard that card. Or target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. Or target creature loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So if you pay the 1 in the black, and you discard 2 cards, you can do every single mode on this card. And so if you're playing something like Dredge, or if you're playing something like Reanimator, you're very happy to do all of those things. And if you happen to be able to kill a Deathrite Shaman, or if you happen to be able to clear the way for your Cathartic Reunion, or if you just happen to drain them and gain some life, you're more than happy to do that. And so for the right people, this card was amazing. But I'll never forget when it was spoiled and people were like, why would I want to do this? I don't understand. Like, card advantage is real, you guys. And it's like, but then there were those of us that were like, and we were just like tapping each other, like, you guys. And so I got mine for like $6. And
Yeah.
excuse me, I'm so excited I can't believe. Now they're $22 cards and they're amazing.
Yeah, the Collective Brutality and the whole sort of cycle was good, but this one in particular,
this was the winner.
This was the big winner. This one saw play. It's one of the cheapest, I believe, if not the cheapest of the Collective.
It's the cheapest of them, of the Collective spells.
Right. So it's cheap. It does a lot of really cool things. It interacts with the graveyard. It kills stupid things like Delvers and so on. Like it does good stuff, which is nice.
It's been in top decks in not just standard, but in modern, of all different types, from Lantern Control and Death's Shadow.
Tron. This was a card that made Tron go black.
And Tron. There's like an Eldrazi aggro-ish kind of deck.
Yeah.
In modern, not to mention, of course, that it was a good part of zombies and
John even loves this in the sideboard. Yeah.
Wow. Well, and this is one of those cards that, like, I didn't necessarily see it coming either. I was just like, it's weird. I guess it's fine. It's okay. And then like,
oh no,
no.
Now it's a major part of Hollow One in modern.
Oh sure. All right. So move on here to number 5, as I have one of those, which is really cool, and it's also one of those that I'm just like, Wizards, did you really have to kind of pigeonhole yourself? Like, I'm glad that at this point, excuse me, A, it's not played as much anymore, and B, I think they've reprinted it just enough to where it's actually reasonable in some fashion, because when Wizards make certain spells, and they make them very specific names, or names that are tied to very specific places, they make it really difficult to reprint them, unless they're in something like a master set or whatever. Which is exactly what they did with not only the Modern Event deck, which didn't really do enough, but in Conspiracy Take the Crown as a rare. In Modern Masters 2017 as an uncommon is Inquisition of Kozilek. And Inquisition of Kozilek talks about Kozilek. So you can't just throw that thing in like Amonkhet. Like, you got to put it in like a set that makes sense for Kozilek to be moving around. So that's a thing. But that said, Inquisition of Kozilek is a 1 black sorcery. It was originally an uncommon from Rise of the Eldrazi. Target player reveals his or her hand. You choose a non-land card from it with converted mana cost 3 or less. That player discards that card. So this is a very powerful spell, and when you're playing nothing but 3 or less costing cards most of the time. And it's funny, like, wait, why is it rare in Conspiracy Take the Crown? It's like, because this card got up to stupid prices. Yeah. Like, when it was the only version, it was in Rise, and then even after the Modern Event deck, it was like, what was it, $25 or something for this thing? It was ridiculous. It was crazy. So it was actually, fine as a rare in Conspiracy for people to get excited about.
I only have one complaint about this card, and it has to do with the art in both cases. So number one, that little thing in the background of the original, that ain't Kozilek. That looks nothing like Kozilek. Why is that called Inquisition of Kozilek? Because the thing doing the Inquisitioning is not Kozilek. So that's my issue number one. Okay. Number two, the weird head-butting art from the Eldrazi. What is going on there exactly? Like, both the arts are just very confusing. And so I love the card, obviously. I've run some Jund in my life, but both the arts just perplex me. Like, I just feel like we need some better art. Like, in both cases, it's just confusing.
I took it as, like, that's one of his kind of minions, henchmen, things that grow off him or whatever. And then the headbutting, I don't know what's like, they were like, make sure you put some floating rocks in the background because they got to know what's in the car. I'm like, what? Why is the face? I'm sure it all makes sense canonically, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Just a massive part of so many different decks. I mean, it changed Cawblade. Like,
oh yeah,
it like Cawblade, the deck that was dominating forever was like, well, we should probably add black for this, and like I'll go for the throat. That's crazy talk.
Yeah.
I mean, it's seen play in Esper Stoneblade, it's seen play in Jund, it's seen basically anywhere black mana is available and this card is legal. You can expect, especially as the formats get older, Legacy discard spells have had their moments in the sun, certainly off and on over the course of time, and Inquisition of Kozilek is right up there with the best of them.
Yeah, and so you'll see also, for example, look at Fatal Push, which is right now about $4, $5 or so. That's going to be a $25 uncommon in a couple of years because they just can't put it in somewhere they want it to. It's got Revolt, which is a very block-specific mechanic. It's exactly the type of card that's going to be $1 million in a few years. Yeah. So that's my Inquisition for you.
MTG Finance.
Wow. Ruben, what's number 5?
I'm sorry?
What's your number 5?
Oh, for me?
Yeah, buddy.
Oh, you're asking about my number 5.
Your number 5.
My number 5 is very similar to yours.
Okay.
It is a 1-mana discard spell.
Goody.
This is one that I thought would be higher on someone else's list, but this is in the pantheon of amazing 1-mana discard spells. It has a ton of huge results over its history, and it is Duress. Duress is my number 5.
Nice.
And Duress is a one black mana discard spell that was originally from Urza's Saga, one of my favorite sets of all time. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-creature, non-land card from it. That player discards that card. I think it's pretty equivalent to Inquisition of Kozilek in terms of its time in the sun. I think that pretty much every Duress art is better than every art from Inquisition of Kozilek. I love all of them.
Yeah.
Particularly the most recent addition to the art list, which is that amazing Ixalan vampire just sort of drying out in a boat in the middle of nowhere. Just some spectacular work there.
I know we're not talking about the best artwork on Duress, and you're not immediately going to the IDW promo with Ashiok, with hand on DAC or whatever.
That was the most recent.
Okay, but how about that Kolagon, though, where you see Kolagon's mouth just wide open trying to eat Zergo Bellstriker? That was a pretty great angle right there.
I mean, all of the arts are spectacular. The original with the idea in front of the man being sort of pulled from him. There's obviously the elf getting threatened with the mind spikes like she's Doctor Strange. Krovax having his mind crunched. I think that's Krovax, maybe not. All of these arts are spectacular.
Yeah, I mean, Duress is main deckable. The Storm decks run at least 3 or 4, as a way to clear the way for what they're trying to do. I certainly ran a couple in DPS the other day, and yeah, it's a great sideboard card. In the right deck, it's main deckable, and it's just a very, for what you're specifically trying to get, it absolutely does its job very well. And there's a reason why it's been reprinted so many times. And this is one of those cards that people have asked for. We've certainly talked about it in our live show, how Standard for a while didn't really have any answers, and people were going, look, we're not asking for Thoughtseize, but we would take a Duress. Like, why is Duress just not in every set? Why is it not in every Standard? And they, for a while, it was like Laybearer the Hard and all these sort of things. Just give us Duress. Like, we're really happy to just have that.
Yeah, Duress finally showed back up in Ixalan. It's been reprinted no less than 24 times. And there's a reason for that. It's just an incredible card. And it's one of those, this is one of the spells that I'm totally happy if it's always in Standard. You know what I mean? It's like Essence Scatter and Negate and Duress. Those things just live in your format because of what they do and what they represent. And they're just beautiful, clean spells that don't need anything extra. They don't need a new version that's hot and sexy. It's just Duress is cool. Just your sideboard option. Yeah, cards can be sexy, okay?
Okay.
Don't at me.
I'm not king shaming.
All right, sweet. Aaron, what's your number 5?
Speaking of getting kinky, this is a card that so there was a deck in Legacy at one point, and they're still trying to make it happen, but there was a deck in Legacy at one point called Check Pile, and Check Pile was basically the best cards you could run. There was no theme, there was no concept, it was just good stuff. And the mana base was basically like a Jenga pile. It was a miracle the deck, no pun intended, it was a miracle the deck just didn't collapse in on itself, because you were running Daze and True Name Nemesis and Lightning Bolts and Wastelands and Leovolds, and this card, because of course you were. We've mentioned it earlier in the show. It's a card that redefined, several different decks. Number 5 is Kolagon's Command. So Kolagon's Command is 1, a black and a red. It's an instant. You can choose 2. Either return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, target player discards a card, destroy target artifact, or Kolagon's Command deals 2 damage to target creature or player. So if you happen to be playing a deck with Snapcaster Mages, some incredible value out of this, or even Fulminator Mages in Modern. This is another one of those cards that Jund absolutely makes room for. It has replaced Lightning in a lot of those decks. It was a card that Czech Pile made sure to include, which said something. Like it was that high of a caliber that Czech Pile was like, you know what, we want to run you with True Name Nemesis. We want to run you with Force of Will. We are willing to play this stretched out mana base to make room for this card. It's just very rarely ever dead. And so it's just a very, very good card. Up to $23 a piece now. Again, it's another one of those cards that's very difficult to reprint because Kolagon is not on every plane, and so it's very unique. It's just very rarely ever a dead card, and just one of the best commands by a really large margin.
Yeah, it's not close. This is another one of those cards that it's like $23 to $25 and rising, and it's not going to stop because it's really difficult to reprint that isn't in a master set. So, so with that said, you know, Kolagon's command is just, when it came out, it was like, wow, it does what? And it was like, it does 4 things, and you get 2 of them? Like...
Yeah.
All the dragon commands were that way, but this one in particular, it was like, man, all these things are so useful all the time. Mm-hmm. I do all of these things constantly. This was my number 10, by the way.
Nice. Yeah, this one is certainly deserving of a spot on the best of all time because, wow, it slices and it dices and it destroys your opponent really easily. All right, let's move on here to number 4. I'm excited to talk about my number 4, so I'm going to run it out here because I didn't know if this was going to be a thing that Ruben was going to pay attention to. I didn't know if this is something that I could just sort of sneak in there and that you wouldn't expect it. But when it comes to discard spells, there's some that you would describe as sort of the best of all time, and some that you would describe as the most broken of all time. This is the latter. This spell is busted, and it's part of the super crazy combo deck that got Memory Jar emergency banned because it's so stupid. Because Windfall is busted. Windfall is broken. This card is dumb. Windfall is a blue and 2 generic mana. It is a sorcery. It was an uncommon in the Commander Anthology last time it was printed. Each player discards their hand, then draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards a player discarded this way. So if you got it off on turn 1, you're drawing 7 cards. Whee! For free! This is great! Yep. It's just, it's nuts. And so the crazy combo decks would be just, you know, chaining these things off their Tolarian Academies or whatever, and it was crazy. And so, yeah, this card is broken and busted, and I love it because it is busted and silly.
Yeah. I had heard of this card, obviously, you know, it's a very iconic card. The first time I ever experienced it, though, was when they first revealed the 1v1 Commander Leagues on Magic Online. Mm-hmm. And I remember going in and I was like, you know, I'm just going to have a fun game of Commander, you guys. Like, let's just see what this is about. And someone was like, my opponent was like, lethal Windfall. And I was like, we are not in Kansas anymore. And I have never played a game of 1v1 online since that game because I was just like, is this what y'all are running? Like, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it.
This card is banned in Legacy. It is restricted in Vintage. Yep. This card is crazy good.
This one came close to my list. It was I put Wheel of Fortune in my draw 7 slot, but this one was close.
Nice. All right. Well, Ruben, what is your number 4?
Well, if you didn't like my Wheel of Fortune pick, boy, howdy, are you going to hate Balance at number 4.
Whoa. All right.
Balance is my number 4, everybody.
Sure.
It's got a Pro Tour win. It's banned and restricted. It's in the cube. It's everything. I mean, it won the first Pro Tour. It won the first Worlds. And it won the second Worlds. So, you know, how much better you got to be. It's the only white card on my list. Surprise, surprise. And it costs a colorless and a white for a sorcery. Each player chooses a number of lands they control equal to the number of lands controlled by the player who controls the fewest, then sacrifices the rest. Players discard cards and sacrifice creatures the same way. And if I may, I would like to add the additional alpha text of cards in hand and creatures in play must be equalized the same way. Creatures lost in this manner may not be regenerated.
That's absolutely correct. And this was back in the day, you know, when rocks were soft and all, they used to restrict cards in Standard. And you got to run 1 balance. And you got 1 balance, you got 1 land tax, you had 1 strip mine, and there was something else I can't remember. But, you know, regardless.
Better make it count.
Yeah, so when you got that 1 balance and you got it off, I mean, it was insane. Like, this spell is not fair. There's nothing balanced about balance, which is kind of the joke. This card is ridiculous for what it does for just 2 mana. Wipes the board, messes up their lands, messes with their hand, and there's a whole bunch of ways that you can make this incredibly advantageous for yourself. I love balance, just if anything else, just for the old school awesomeness.
One of the primary ways to unbalance balance is, of course, with artifacts and the artifact mana, and so you could drop a couple of Moxen onto the board. And in addition to making them sacrifice a creature, make them also discard some cards, maybe sacrifice a land or 2.
Iconic art as well. The art has been done a couple of times, but you always see the scales. When you see the scales, you're dealing with balance. Restore balance, again, always with the scales.
Oh, man. So let's move on here to number 4 for Aaron. Aaron, what's number 4?
I'm going to shake things up a little bit. You wanted a twist, eh? We've been gone 2 weeks. I'm going to spice it up for you. My number 4 was higher on somebody's list, but Ruben has encouraged me to think outside the box a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and switch it up. And I'm 90% sure you guys do not have this on your list. I'm going to go ahead and replace my number 4 live. These guys don't know.
Wow. I love it.
Wow.
My number 4 is a card, and I mentioned this earlier. Modern Dredge really got its start as a deck called Zombie Loam. We didn't have Cathartic Reunion. We didn't have Prized Amalgam. We had a very slow engine that allowed you to play these very grindy games that would allow you to just really make the game go long. And you had cards like Smallpox, and you had things like Lingering Souls. But what really drove the deck was my number 4. And this is a card I have a lot of fond memories of. And the card itself is fun, but just some of the things you're able to do with it, when you pair it with things like Squee Goblin Nabob, or you pair it with things like Vengeful Pharaoh, you can have a really good time with Zombie Infestation.
Nice.
So Zombie Infestation is 1 in a black. It was originally printed in Odyssey. It's an enchantment. You can discard 2 cards from your hand to put a 2/2 black zombie creature token into play. So if your opponent's attacking you, you're just like, whoa, Vengeful Pharaoh. And then you get a 2/2 zombie and kill their thing. It feels fantastic. You play with Squee Goblin Nabob, where you're able to pitch it, make a zombie. During your upkeep, you get those squeeze back, and you always have 2 cards to feed the infestation. It gets out of hand very, very quickly. Burn, you play a card like Golgari Brownscale. So you discard your Brownscale, draw 2 life, and then whoop, and burn players just scoop. And I've had a lot of fun with this card. You can't know where you're going until you know where you've been, and we wouldn't have Modern Dredge today if it didn't start with Lone Pox and with Zombie Pox, and this is the card that made it all possible. So big shout out to this card. And I just, once I knew we could kind of break the rules a little bit, Ruben, I knew I had to include this card. So
yeah, I mean, it's that one's a little weird for me because it's not making your opponent. You can't make your opponent do anything.
Sure.
But it does say discard on it. You are discarding cards.
Discard on it, and that's what I said about the other cards. So I totally am on board. Yeah, Zombie Infestation. First of all, we want to talk about on brand.
Well, first of all, this is incredibly on brand. This is also on brand for the discard spells in the way I think that Liliana the Veil was not. In terms of, I can see this being okay versus not okay. It's fine.
Okay, fair.
But this card is very, very powerful, and it's one of those cards you can kind of look back and you go, oh, look how hard they used to work for a 2/2. Look what they used to do. Isn't that stupid? Wow, that was dumb. Those cards are terrible. I mean, we're like, no, that's what we had. That's all we had. And it's like, yeah, it was. It wasn't that great, but back in the day, it was awesome. Mm-hmm. All right. Moving here to number 3. We're with the top 3 discard spells of all time, and mine happens to be higher on someone else's list, and I'm totally okay with that. Ruben, what's your number 3? My
number 3 is also my 3rd higher on someone else's list.
Aaron, your only hope. What's your number 3?
I can't be witty twice in a row, so my number 3 is also higher on someone else's list.
Wow, whiffed on number 3. That's okay. Yeah. By process of elimination, I know what somebody's number 2 or number 1 happens to be. Right. Ruben, what's your number 2?
My number 2 is one of the most iconic discard spells of all time. It's had success at every level from the beginning of Magic until present day. It has Pro Tour wins and top 8s galore. It has had a banned and restricted history. It is obviously in the cube. It has several iconic artworks, which should clue you into what it is. It is Hymn to Torok. Hymn to Torok is black sorcery. Most recently reprinted in Eternal Masters. Originally, I believe, from the Fallen Empires expansion.
Yep.
Where you get several of the iconic arts from. Mm-hmm. Very simple line of text here. Target player discards 2 cards at random.
Yes.
What's your favorite Hymn to Torok art?
It's got to be the wolf.
You like the wolf?
My favorite is what I call the ladies' restroom version, which is the Liz Danforth, the people around in the circle, because that's what women do in the bathroom together. We all do rituals. And so, yeah, that's my favorite one right there.
It's
I think of the originals, I'm partial to Creepy Old Man, Casper's but I really like the new art.
The weird dinner table one? There's that one.
Yeah, there's the weird dinner table one, which I don't get at all.
Yeah, I'm not sure what we're hemming there, as it were.
You say your prayers before dinner. You all hold hands. And...
Right,
well, this was
I love me a hymn to Torah.
Yeah. I mean, this was my number 3. Like, I certainly feel like this is the top 3 discard spells of all time. Me and Ruben are right there because Hymn to Turok was also restricted in standard. Fun fact, because it was stupid when you did ritual, hymn, like the game's over. It doesn't really matter what happens at that point. But, as a spell that is so efficient, like we didn't get anywhere close to this until like Wrench Mind or something in Mirrodin. Like that's how long it took, was 5th Dawn to Wrench Mind before you get 2 cards for 2 black mana. And
even recently, it was like I think it was in Shadows over Innistrad, they made a Delirium version where if you had Delirium, you would get a hymn version. And I remember people just going, why would I want this? And it's like, listen here, you little bastards. Like, not knowing
my day
it was, and just again how the times have changed to where you'd have to jump through a couple hoops to get it, but Delirium wasn't that hard to achieve, as we all know. And so, but yeah, it just never made it down. Where people are like, it's fine, and it's like look how far we've come. Where a Hymn to Turok just does nothing.
Yeah, like they still can never reprint this card in terms of like it being in a fair set. This is an iconic card that is way overpowered in a very
was the only hand disruption spell that Randy Bueller had access to in Lower Potence. When we think of Necropotence decks now, we think of lots of hand disruption options. Well, this is the only discard spell that he had access to.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Well, Aaron, what is your number 2?
My number 2 just hits all the marks. Iconic art to this day. There's just nothing else like it. It's seen play in multiple formats. It is main deckable at times. I've certainly run it in Dredge. Reanimator has certainly run it. And the nice thing about it is that you can even target yourself. We've had that conversation throughout the show about what does it mean to be a discard spell? Does it purely mean that the card is offensive, that you're purely using it against other people? Or does it mean that you yourself also have the option to discard? And are there benefits to doing that? And I feel like no other card really embodies that, like my number 2, which is Unmask. So Unmask is from Arcadian Mask. It's 3 and a black. It's a sorcery. It says you may remove a black card in your hand from the game instead of paying Unmask's mana cost. Look at target player's hand and choose a non-land card from it. That player discards that card. So say you're playing Legacy Reanimator, unmask yourself, whoop, reanimate. And your opponent's just like, what? Like, what happened here? This is another one of those cards that when you play it, your opponent kind of just instinctively reveals their hand, sort of like Vendilion Click, where it's like, oh no, unmask myself. And then they're just like, because nothing good is coming from that. In Vintage, this is something the Vintage Dredge decks use, specifically against cards like Paradoxical Outcome and very combo-heavy metagames. Sort of like the Black Force of Will, if you will. But then you have the iconic art from RK Post, which is Volrath being disguised as Takara, which is Stark's daughter, and just that art that he's been able to, really make his own and still gets asked to do on playmats and bags and things of that nature. So between the art and between how powerful it is, it's just a great card. And, when I think of discard spells, there's just nothing more powerful or more versatile than Unmask.
Yeah, and the versatility itself, this was my number 7 because it's amazing and it's still seen play to this day. And Mercadian Mask didn't have a lot going for it. Mercadian Mask was what I would call an apology block. We've had those before.
The block was atrocious.
The set was anytime the Phantom drafts come around, you always hear that groan on Twitter of like, we're just going to sit this one out. Like, no one likes doing this.
It's just the runes of protection or whatever. Like, the whole thing is just ridiculous. What's the peeve? The one that you play a black and you deal damage to all creatures and players.
Pestilence?
Pestilence is in that, and it's common and it's dumb. So, like, there's problems with, and I'm actually talking about Urza's at this point. Let's move back to Mercadian Black Mask. Mercadian Masks, that set in and of itself is okay. But block was just atrocious. The block was the apology block for Urza's. We're sorry.
Is so bad.
We got to depower it. They had another one when Champions of Kamigawa showed up, and we're like, we're sorry for Mirrodin. Here's something that sucks. That kind of happens. But Unmasked to this day, the 5th most expensive card in the set for a reason.
Huge story moment too. The Mercadian Masks novel was the first novel that I actually read, and the moment where the character is revealed to be a different big bad of the set if you want to go look at what the story is about. But essentially, there's this big conspiracy traveling across multiple planes, dealing with Volrath and dealing with the crew of the Weatherlight, and it's a huge story moment. In addition to being the original pitch card of Pitch Dredge before they adopted Force of Will, I think, as being something that you could cast without having to have mana in play. So yeah, just an excellent card. I think it was also part of the initial Frigoride decks that sort of tried to break Icarid early before Dredge was even a mechanic. By John Friggin Rizzo. Shout out to one of the old school writers for Magic the Gathering. And yeah, just a fabulous card all the way around.
All right, so we're gonna move in here to my number 2. You want to talk about old school? We got to go all the way 25 years ago. This card showed up. It was busted then. It's busted now. It's in every vintage cube ever. It will always be in every. If you're in a powered cube, you understand that this card exists in it. Like if you're like, oh, this power card, okay, great, because I don't want to play against this card, and I'll just have to first play this card because it's like stupid, and like if you get it off early in the game, it's insane, and I expect it to be on your lists or at least on Ruben's list. I hope. Mind Twist is ridiculous.
Yeah. This
is your number
3.
Banned in Legacy.
Nice. Yeah, it is.
Of course it's banned in Legacy. Are you...
Hold on. Mind Twist.
Kidding me?
Mind Twist is a black and X generic mana for a sorcery that says target player discards X cards at random.
Can we ask the question on everybody's lips, though? What exactly is happening in that original art? Because I thought for the longest time...
Mind Twisted, man!
Well, I thought for the longest time that little flap was that person's arm. But if you look really closely, no, the arms are underneath their cowl. What is on their head exactly?
It's just like a bad hat that just like kind of like fell over.
Okay, I thought it was like a scroll or like something. And then you have the Amonkhet Invocation art, which is a little more tangible, where it's literally a spirit just like coming out and messing with someone. But I spent literal years just wondering what is going on with that original art.
I mean, the Mind Twist, if it wasn't for the like garbage fire around it, the invocation itself art is really cool.
Yeah.
But that frame is just frame kills me every time.
This card would have as many points in Grand Prix and Pro Tour top 8s and Worlds wins and all of that if it weren't banned immediately for how ridiculous it is. People were splashing this card. They were splashing one copy of Mind Twist in Zoo. When they were playing Zoo in Worlds in 1994. They put like 85 ways to make black mana. This was the only black card in the 75. That's how good this card.
I like how we did the classic Evan Rubin flip of him the Turok and Mind Twist as 3 and 2, and his is Mind Twist and him the Turok as 3 and 2.
Yeah,
that's adorable.
Yeah. Do you think we share a number 1?
That would be weird, right? Wouldn't it be weird if our number 1 was literally the same thing? Wouldn't it be weird if the number 1 is a card whose story I've told at least like 3 times on this podcast? Yeah. And by God, I want to tell it again. Because it was my first Pro Tour. My first, and turns out, only Pro Tour I got to participate in as a player, as it turns out. Because I got to fly to Valencia. And this is in 2007, and the whole thing flooded, and it was ridiculous, and it was the only Pro Tour day 1 that's ever been canceled. Even when there was a blizzard in New York City, there was a Pro Tour.
So Mr. Orange Valencia, or is that why you're called Mr. Orange?
No, that's not it. Okay, so I went to the tournament, and I was talking. Well, look, that tournament was so cool. I mean, like, if you could just imagine how impactful this event was, it's kind of insane. When I met Rich Hagon, I met R&D for the first time, I met Randy Bueller for the first time, I met Aaron Forsyth and all these people, and it was incredible because I got to meet other R&D members who I did not name, who I talked to at the time, and I was just kind of going on about random stuff or whatever, and I'm like, ooh, I get to talk to people, make the game, right? This is cool. So I get to complain about why is Thoughtseize rare? And they said, Evan, it's the best card in the set. And I was just like,
oh, right.
And the financial lights kind of blew up, and I was like, wait a minute. Magic isn't just like this thing that I love that we can share in. It's also a business, and it also needs people to buy packs, and they did.
Evan's financial brain balls dropped at that moment.
Wow.
His voice changed tone, and a whole new world opened up to him.
My God. But this card is insane. Ruben, tell us what Thoughtseize does.
What doesn't it do? Thoughtseize is a 1 black mana sorcery originally from Lorwyn, reprinted in Theros. It also is in Iconic Masters and has an Amonkhet invocation in case you want to shell out an extra $170. It is a sorcery. Target player reveals their hand. Aaron, you can get behind targeting yourself. I've certainly done it a number of times to get Protean Hulks into the graveyard. You choose a non-land card from it. Boy, that's a hell of a sentence. Mm-hmm. That player discards that card. You lose 2 life. 2 life. For the low cost of 1 mana and 2 life, you get to take the best card out of your opponent's hand.
Yeah, this was my number 3. You know, we've certainly covered several discard spells throughout this list, but a lot of them have limitations. You know, with Duress, you know, it has to be, you know, a non-creature spell or whatever. And Inquisition has the 3 or less or whatever. This is anything. It could be a planeswalker, an artifact, an enchantment, anything that's not a land you can grab. That's really, really big. This is the reason why Mono Black was so dominant in Standard back in Theros and Return Ravnica block. You know, everyone had their theories. You know, they were blaming Pack Rat. They were blaming, you know, the Spectre at the time, but no, it was this that cleared the way for turn 1 Thoughtseize, turn 2 Pack Rat. Nice Supreme Verdict you got there, nice Anger of the Gods you got there. None of that mattered because you were able to run Thoughtseize. You know, it's just the card that, you know, Jund, this is a card that even when Thoughtseize isn't good, Jund will still run at least 1 or 2. They will never leave home without this card. You know, obviously the Pox decks love it. I mean, it just does. It's just the perfect tool for whatever bothers you. And yeah, there's a reason why, you know, it is what it is.
And it's near all of our top of the list because like everyone wants Mono Black control to work until it works. And then they're like, oh my God, what did we do?
I mean, and then it found new life in the Death Shadow decks where you want to hurt yourself. You know, you don't mind. You know, the 2 life kind of stings a little bit if you're a dedicated black mage. You're fine, kind of hurting yourself a little bit. But against decks like, you know, in the Death Shadow decks, you're firing them off almost indiscriminately. We're like, Thoughtseize, I don't care. Yeah, that thing, get rid of it. I just need the 2 life.
So the thing I find most fascinating and most damning and most impressive, I guess, about Thoughtseize is that when you think about the 3 most dominant decks that use Thoughtseize, Jund, Fairies, and Mono Black Devotion, the most dominant Standard decks that the card has been in, none of those won a Pro Tour. And, well, Jund did, but not Jund with Thoughtseize.
Sure.
And yet, Thoughtseize has won 4 Pro Tours.
Wow.
Thoughtseize won with Green-Black Elves in the hands of Charles Gindy at Pro Tour Hollywood. Later in Abzan with both Patrick Chapin and Ari Lax. And then, of course, this year, Luis Salvato won with Lantern. That is a hell of a pedigree. I don't see how anything could possibly ever.
You brought up a really good point, though, Ruben. You know, with the Lantern thing, is because Thoughtseize only costs 1 black mana, it's so splashable. Where like you don't even have to be a dedicated discard deck. You know, I've run them in ad nauseum as a way to protect myself, protect the combo. The Malira decks have run them at some point to protect themselves. Affinity, you know, Affinity doesn't even run really any colored mana sources, but they got Mox Opals. They can make the 1 black, you know, with the Springleaf Drum or something like that. And so it's an incredibly splashable card, even in decks that don't normally have the means to make that mana.
Because you can trade a card and 2 life for anything, and that is amazing. This to me is the best because they will never make a spell better than Thoughtseize. They'll never make a discard spell that just outright is better than you lose less life or you draw a card or something crazy. You know, like they're not going to top this one, in my opinion. However, for Aaron's number 1, due to the process of elimination, it is my number 6 and Ruben's number 7. Yep. Aaron, what's your number 1 discard spell?
So the number 1 thing that I think the majority of our discard spells have in common is that you get to see the person's hand. And then you get to make your determination. So you don't necessarily know what you're looking for. You have a hunch they have something that you really don't want to deal with. But a lot of times you're not really sure. You're like, control deck, there's probably something here. And you're going to show me, and I'm probably going to find something I hate, and we're going to get rid of it. My number 1 breaks that rule. And my number 1 comes with a skill game all of its own. You know, there have been a lot of articles written about Brainstorm in Blue and the skill that it takes to really effectively use Brainstorm and get the most out of it. There have also been articles written about my number 1 in terms of what you need to do to get the most out of this card. You know, it requires an intimate knowledge of whatever format you're playing, whatever decks you're facing, and what cards they're going to be running. Because if you happen to strike gold, you can have a very, very good time with this card. And even if you don't, you still get to look at their hand. But this card really changes the game in terms of what a discard spell can do. You know, not only do you have to name the card first, but if there happen to be multiples of that card, you can discard those. Thoughtseize is great, but let's say they had 2 copies of Supreme Verdict. Well, you can take one of them. You got to figure out how you're going to deal with the other one. So if you name blind on this one, you can take 2 cards. If there were 2 Supreme Verdicts, you name Supreme Verdict, you get all of them. There's nothing better than that. And there's nothing better than my number 1, which is Cabal Therapy. So Cabal Therapy is originally printed in Judgment. It's sorcery for 1 black. You can name a non-land card. So you have to name the card before they even flip the hand over. Target player reveals his or her hand and discards from it all cards with that name. Do you know how good it feels to name Force of Will and see 2 or 3 Force of Will sitting there? It feels amazing. I like to call it a sex therapy, personally. Marvin Gaye fans out there, hey, got you. And it also comes with flashback, sacrifice a creature. You may play this card from your graveyard for its flashback cost and then remove it from the game. Young Pyromancer loves this card. You pay your 1 black, you get a Pyromancer token, and you can sacrifice that token and get a Cabal Therapy out of it. Storm likes to run this with Empty the Warrens, make a bunch of goblins, and whoop, there's your Cabal Therapy. Dredge, obviously sacrificing Icarid. Well, you just made 4 zombies with 1 Cabal Therapy. Feels fantastic. And I've certainly gotten better at the game of knowing what you're facing and saying, okay, this is the deck I'm looking at. Close your eyes. What is the card you don't want to see? And that's what you name. And so I love the skill of it. I love the art, the original art of Ron Spencer, the new Graveborn art, which was recently done in Eternal Masters. It's just an iconic card, and it's one of the reasons why I love playing the decks that I do, and I just couldn't think of any other card to put at number 1.
So when you get that feeling, you want Cabal healing. That's what you're saying. Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
This is a terrific card, and this is just one of the first true miser cards. When this is a card that builds stories, There I was at the PTQ playing for the top 8, and then they blind name X and took 2 copies out of my hand. I almost flipped the table because I was dead immediately.
My favorite story that I love to tell is when I first started playing Legacy, I was facing Legacy Burn. I was playing on Magic Online, and the Cabal Therapy resolves. You have to type it in the field. I named Firestorm, and so the hand gets revealed, and I see 3 copies of Fire Blast. And I was like, that's it. That's the card. That's what I want to. Why aren't the cards going away? What's happening here? And then I'm like, Fire Blast, Firestorm. I named the wrong card. And so they threw the Fire Blast at me.
That's
but
what
I just didn't know. I didn't remember what the cards did. And I was like, oh no. And so that's my favorite Cabal Therapy story is I thought I was such a hot position, and I was totally wrong.
The naming the wrong card stories for, obviously there's the famous Humpus Wumpus story.
Oh, the Humpus Wumpus.
For demonic consultation. There's I've certainly named Elvish Mystic with my pithing needle in the cube, and then my opponent tapped their land war elves anyway. Things like that. Naming the wrong card is always a fun experiment, and certainly Cabal Therapy is the poster child. The reason why I wanted Cabal Therapy on my list, in addition to supporting my presumable Aaron's number 1 pick, I knew it would be higher. But it's also just maybe the most skill testing card in Magic.
It's up
blind therapying someone, or even if you just see a land, there have been entire articles written on trying to get a read on what your opponent's fetch land means for what their deck is. How likely is it? Your opponent goes Bloodstained Mire, go. What do you name with your Cabal Therapy, right?
Man,
and it's so interesting. There have been so many discussions on what to do with the card. It's incredibly powerful.
It goes deeper than that. Back in the day, at least back when I was grinding, you knew sort of who was the control player, who was the guy who always brought merfolk, who was the storm player. You knew those people, and so when you'll just blind name it. You just blind name something, just be like, are you playing what you're always playing? And sometimes they'd fool you, and sometimes you just destroy them, just straight blind. Round 1, turn 1, Swamp Cabal Therapy, killed it. That was always an amazing feeling.
Yeah, playing in a Legacy tournament and being on the play and going Swamp Cabal Therapy against someone you don't know, and then just being Brainstorm and snagging their Brainstorm after they kept a 1-lander. Oh man, I love that. That's my favorite.
That is joy in a bottle. That is Magic the Gathering for you. But with that said, that is our top 10 discard spells. We did it, guys.
Yeah, fun episode.
You will see them on screen right now for your review. Take a look at my list Aaron's list, Ruben's top 10. And we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about, and we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-hosts. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. It feels good to be back.
Yeah. Thank you, Ruben.
Thank you. I really like this card and also that card.
Wow. Oh, my goodness. Well, we're going to move on here to our final slide. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, my co-hosts, Aaron Campbell and Ruben Bressler, you guys for watching and listening, and hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Please follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe, do everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at Twitch.tv at Magic Mikes, on Twitter at Magic Mikes Cast, our Magic Mikes subreddit, or the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Talk to us privately at MagicMikesPodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at MagicMikesPodcast@Libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes, or join us here next week. Same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.